you all for coming. I know it takes a special effort to get out and leave the house this time of night and come out to anything, so you've all made a special effort, and I really appreciate it. It's also fun for me to be talking to a local audience, because normally I speak on the radio and sometimes TV to national audiences, and with you guys, I can be a little bit more specific. I can tell you exactly where some of these things happen, and we have all sorts of things that happen that are out of the ordinary here in Jackson County. Some of you already know about some of them, but it may be a surprise to others. So with that, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to introduce somebody, and I don't want her to stand up until I'm done talking. Her name is Kathy Clayton, and she and her husband, Johnny, were very instrumental in my efforts to save information about an ancient race of little people that once lived in this area, especially where the university is. And I'll refer to it as Western, but if you don't know the area, it's Western Carolina University. Johnny was one of the people who worked on the earliest constructions at Western. And in the late 1930s, he was involved in building the McKee Building. And the McKee Building is now one of the oldest on campus. And when they were cut, whoops, yeah, I can move. And I can't, can I?
It's okay.
And when they were cutting into virgin soil, at least they thought it was virgin soil, they cut into two little tunnels, which are now known as Cherokee Little People tunnels. And these tunnels are square cut, about 3.5 feet across, 3.5 feet high, square cut in this real dense red clay. And the top is arched. And if you know anything about engineering, that makes the tunnel stronger. It won't collapse as easily. And Johnny was not only that, but he, as a young boy, got to see one of the first tunnels that anybody had heard about. His father managed a mica mine up on Wilson Creek on Covey Mountain Road. And as I said, I'm getting real specific. And one day, the men who were working for his father came back to their house, and they were talking in very excited tones because they had found one of these little tunnels. And what they were doing is they were creating a tunnel in one direction, and perpendicular, they ran into another one. And it was one of these ancient tunnels. Because of Johnny's connections, Kathy Clayton and Johnny connected me with lots of old-timers. And these were men who worked at constructing buildings on the campus. Some put in sewer lines. Some constructed all sorts of buildings. When they poured concrete for the stadium, the cement began to disappear into a hole. And it went on and on and on, and they had trouble filling it. And it was one of these tunnels. And it's right between the stadium on the back side where the Episcopalian church is. How many people know what I'm talking about? You know the area? Good. So what happened was, Kathy and Johnny would connect me with these old timers, and we would gather around their dining table, and I would record their stories. And the more I heard, I realized that none of this information had been recorded. And so I wrote this book, Cherokee Little People Are Real, because I wanted to save the information. At the time I did these interviews, it was back in 2000, 2001. And since then, how many people are still? This is Kathy Clayton. Go ahead and stand, okay? How many people are still living from that group?
You don't know what a privilege it was working with Mary Joyce.
Well, she always gave me cookies too, so. And sometimes they would take me over to somebody else's house who wasn't able to get out. At the time I did the interviews, most of the men were in their 80s, a few in their 70s. That was back in 2000, 2001, and there's just, I don't know how many are left. One
That I know of, yes.
Is that Stedman Mitchell?
No, he
He
passed.
did pass. Who's left?
J.E. Wheatley.
He's the only one.
He's still here.
Okay. So I was very fortunate to start doing these interviews back in 2000 when these guys were mostly in their 80s. And Kathy is going to turn 93 next month. And I just want to wish you a real happy birthday. May this be your birthday party. I'm going to tell you just a few things that I've learned about the Cherokee Little People. There's a whole lot of information. But not only did they find these little tunnels, they also found little skeletons. And there was a professor at the campus, his name was Clint Dodson. And he had one of these skeletons, and he kept the skull on his desk like a decorative paperweight. And he thought it was a child's skull from the Indian Mountain. Wrong. One of the high school teachers went and picked it up one day and said, "This is not a child's skull. It has all of its wisdom teeth." So, and the rest of the skeleton, this professor kept on his mantle at his house. I don't know what his wife thought about that. I don't think I would like it. But anyhow. He also introduced me to a former moonshiner, and I went off in the woods with one of these guys, and we were trying to find the old still where they had discovered a pile of little people bones back during Prohibition days. And it was a bit of an adventure, and the man who was leading me was, I think, 89 at the time, and he had macular degeneration, so he could only see out the side. So we're going through this woods trying to find it still. Well, we didn't find it, but it was a bit of an adventure. Now, I want to update you on the little people. There's a couple that live on a mountain that overlooks Silver. And just Monday, we posted a photo on the website, skyshiftsovercaches.com, and we believe it's a Cherokee little person running wild in the woods. Well, for 17 years, I have been hearing from people saying that the little people still exist, but I never saw proof. This is the closest that we come to proof. So when you get home, turn on the computer, go to the web. Whoops, did I lose it? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And on the home page, on the right-hand side, we have the most recent stories. So there's one there about the photo of the possible little person. So we were kind of thrilled after 17 years having no evidence that they really exist, and now there's a possibility that they still do exist. So, go ahead.
What was that website?
Did you get a card?
Oh, it's on your card.
It's on the card.
Okay.
It's on the card. Now I'm going to switch subjects. We're going to go to UFOs. There have been so many UFO sightings in Jackson County that I can't even remember them all. And we've been posting them since we started the website in 2008. And I truly do not know how many we've posted. And what I'm going to do now is to tell you some places where they have specifically been seen. There are a couple people in the audience, I will not identify them, but they've had some of these experiences. Most people want to stay anonymous, so we'll keep it that way. One of the first ones would be at the Harris Hospital. And I've seen one there myself. I was going on 74, turned off at the exit where the hospital is, and I saw a UFO in the sky in broad daylight. The sky was clear. Obviously, there were no stars, and it wasn't a plane because it stayed in one place. And then when I got down to the dollar store, see how you have to really be local to follow this lecture tonight, it just poof and disappeared. There's a lot of open space around the hospital where you can see quite a bit of the sky. Now there's another woman who's in the audience, and she and her 19-year-old daughter and 10-year-old son were coming from the Waynesville direction, and about where Oker Hill Church is, they saw some weirdness in the sky, in the western sky. And she said they thought at first it was jets, but they were very tiny, and she said they were flying more like a cluster of bees. And they kept looking at these, and they finally exited, parked at the hospital, and here's these UFOs kind of going around like bees, and while they're watching, a UFO flies over their head. So that's right here in town. Now I'm going to jump to Dillsboro. The intersection at 441 and 74 and all the areas around there, there have been so many sightings. One of the early ones was from a law enforcement officer, and she and her partner were going west on 74, and they saw this huge UFO in the sky, triangular shape, and as they got closer, it was hovering over that intersection, just above the treetops. It was huge. She said it was bigger than a football field. And she said it would like tip, like a small plane would tip its wings a little bit, and even though it was one place, it would do this. And when it did, they could see the lit up windows, kind of a dull yellow color, and they could see one of the inside walls inside this UFO. She wanted to turn around and really check this out. Her partner was a little bit nervous. He would not stop. She was having special feelings when that happened. Make sure I don't miss some of these. Another location where we have lots of UFO sightings is Western Carolina University, which we'll call Western. And one man was traveling on 107. As he was going through Catamount Gap, he saw another of these triangular ships gliding right through there and toward the campus. He said it actually started he first saw it from the Jackson County Library, and then it went and disappeared toward the Balsam Ridge, going right over the campus. Remember the thumb measurement? He said his thumb looked like a speck on the side of that UFO. So it was really large and really close to the ground. Then there was a park ranger who was trying to learn about constellations so he could teach a course on astronomy as a park ranger. So he's up on the road that takes you up to Jackson County Airport. If you don't know this area, we don't have our airport down in the valley like most places. We have it up on a mountain ridge. So when you take, I don't know how sensible that is, but that's where it is. And when he went up there, you can look out and look down on Western University. And he saw a UFO rotating. I think his was a ball-shaped light. They usually rotate, or you get changes in color. Another place where there's been lots of sightings is Lake Gwenville. And people have seen them from Beatree Road, which is just to the east of the lake. They've seen them over the lake. Probably the best witness is a man who is a commercial pilot who flies out of Atlanta. And I don't know if he has a home there or if he was vacationing there, but he saw a UFO, again, rotating colors, right over the lake. He said it was about 2,000 feet above the lake. And it's always nice to get a report from somebody who has that kind of background, because they're not going to be fooled by, you know, some kind of a human flying vehicle. Now, I will say the most active place for, I felt like I just went out. Did I go out?
Yeah.
Hello? No? It worked? Got it, okay. Cashers has been the most active spot in Jackson County. It's actually the place that inspired us to start the website, which is skyshiftsovercashers.com. We have a gal up there, her name is Glennis Heenan. She is like our sky watcher up there. And she's gotten pictures of all sorts of different kinds of UFOs. She's gotten brown ones, and she's gotten red ones, and she's white ones, and triangular ones, and some really odd things. One is something that looks like an asteroid. I mean, it looks like a big rock in the sky. It's not flying, it's hovering. And I've never seen on the internet anywhere a UFO that looks like a hovering asteroid. But we have pictures of that on the website. Let's see. She's also caught a phenomenon, which again, I think is very unusual. And there were UFOs in the sky, and they kind of began to change in shape, and they actually created a 4-digit number in the sky. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers. It was like 1692 or something along those lines. I'm sorry?
1611.
I honestly don't remember.
1612? Was it 1612?
I don't remember.
Version of the King James.
We put so much stuff on this website, my brain doesn't hold on to it all. I'm sorry. But just the phenomenon of it morphing into actual numbers that you can see is pretty phenomenal. I'm going to go on to a new subject. Bigfoot. Are there any hunters in the audience? Or I should put it this way. I hope there's no hunters in the audience that want to go kill a Bigfoot. One of the reasons that I don't give specific locations for the Bigfoot is because I know there are hunters who want to have the trophy, who want to get a Bigfoot and bag it, and I'm not going to contribute to that. So I will only tell you this. We here in Silver, I went out again, didn't I? Hello? Okay. I don't think I even touched it. We have mountains all around us. We have the Blue Ridge Mountains, we have the Plot Balsam Mountains, we have the Smoky Mountains all to the north of the city. We have the Balsam Ridge to the east, and we have, I don't know what the ridge is called. It's part of the Appalachian Mountains that goes between Cashers and Highlands. Whiteside's part of that ridge. I don't know what the ridge is called. I think it's the Appalachian Mountains.
It was 1619, Mary.
1619. We
Yeah.
never totally figured out why we were seeing that number. So, and while I'm at it, I'm going to back up because I just saw somebody in the audience who had a great UFO story to tell us a long time ago. I'll tell you that before we go back to Bigfoot. It was on a Thanksgiving evening, and she and her friends were having a Thanksgiving dinner party on Cove Creek Road. And after dinner, it was totally dark, they went outside just to take a breather, get some fresh air, and they were looking toward Balsam Mountain Ridge. And all of a sudden, they saw one UFO pop up, and then another one, and again with this arm and the thumb, she said it was about the size of a lemon or a lime. So they're watching these two lights, and they took off and went toward Asheville, or went toward the east. And then suddenly, one of them did an abrupt turn, came back in their direction, and disappeared. Then she had a funny feeling. She looked up, and this humongous UFO was over her head. It was so low to the ground that, or the treetop level, that it blocked out all the stars. Just totally blocked them out. And she said she cranked her head way back, and she still couldn't see anything but this giant UFO. And she could even see the texture of the metal, which was, I believe, a matte finish. So that's really getting big and close and unusual. Excuse me. I always laugh at people on TV who have to stop and take a water break, but here goes. Okay, back to Bigfoot. All I'm going to tell you is that we've had multiple Bigfoot stories. We've posted more than 40 on the website. They're not all local, but that's a lot of Bigfoot stories. I'm going to tell you about some of the ones in this area, and they were seen by people in one of these mountains I mentioned, and I'm not going to be more specific. One account was from a man who was in the military. He had to retire early because he had cancer. And so he really wasn't an old man. I would say he was in his 40s, early 40s. And he bought himself a little house off an old logging road. And behind it, there was a mountain that just went straight up. No development, no roads, nothing, just ladders behind him. And about 30 feet below him was a creek. The first time he heard anything about a Bigfoot, he didn't even know about them. But he heard this sound, and if you're into Bigfoot at all, you know they like to pick up a big log and whack it against the side of a tree. And he heard this sound, and he was a bit mystified. And so he, with great trepidation, went out to find out the source of this unusual sound. And he actually saw a Bigfoot with a great big limb banging against the tree. He later learned that the Bigfoot often did that when his neighbors did target shooting. And I guess, again, it was a type of protest. People start shooting and he starts banging on the tree. The next thing, he heard sounds in a creek near his house, and it sounded like children playing in the water. And he knew there were no kids anywhere near his house, so he was puzzled by that. And at first, it sounded like it was coming from one spot, and then he heard this splashing from two different places on the creek. He eventually found out it was two juvenile Bigfoot, but he didn't instantly know that. Then one night, he's sitting out on his porch, looking toward the creek, and he had what would be like a street light next to his garage. And he saw a family of Bigfoot go across the road. And he observed over time that they always traveled in the same order. First would come the female, then would come the male, then would come the two kids. And no matter when they crossed that trail, which must have been a regular route for them, they always went in that order. I don't know why they would have chosen that, but they did. I suspect that this man started doing organic gardening because of his cancer. He was probably trying to do everything he could to be healthy. And the Bigfoot were very interested in his garden. And the male would come down, but not immediately, but eventually came down. Okay, And so the Bigfoot would come down when he was doing gardening, and eventually he would start sharing food with the Bigfoot. So they became friends. And if you want to read the story without my skipping over parts, in the search bar on the home page of the website, just type in my Sasquatch neighbor, or neighbors, and you'll find the story. The other really big story happened in another location. And to get to this location, we had to go up a mountain road, then we had to go winding through roads, and then we had to go down a one-lane road that was next to a creek, all wedged between, I knew I couldn't talk without using my hand. I don't have any Italian in me, but I swear to God, this hand thinks it's Italian. Anyhow, so we go down this narrow road, wedged in between two mountains, and all of a sudden it opens up into a round valley. And there are two houses, a larger one and a smaller one, and a barn and a pond. And so the lady who was having these Bigfoot experiences took us down there. By this time, they were very distressed by their Bigfoot experiences. They eventually figured out what the problem was. They had a repair person going out there with a jackhammer to drill into the stone that was used as a dam so that this pond was created. And suddenly that jackhammer went into a hollow space and the water began to go down there. Well, there's a lot of caves in this particular area. And afterwards, the people figured out that they must have flooded the cave that these Bigfoot lived in. And the Bigfoot weren't happy. And they had lived there for many years, never had any problem, though the lady said sometimes it felt like somebody was watching them, but they never saw anything, they never had a bad experience. After that episode with the jackhammer, they had a lot of experiences. It started with muddy handprints all over their vehicles, and it graduated from that to, you could see where they had scratch marks, where they Bigfoot had tried to get in the car. They eventually learned how to do the handle and got inside. At that point, their muddy paw prints are all over the interior of the car. In fact, at one point, they started playing with all the dials, and they actually turned on the ignition. Now, they didn't go anywhere, but the lights were on. The next step was these muddy prints began to appear on the door of the small house. By the way, I have pictures of all of this on the website, and if you just type in Valley of the Bigfoot, you can find the story and the photos, and you can see them for yourself. Once they got inside the house, you could see where they had taken their paws or their hands, gotten under the doors, and you can see the scratch marks, the stuff where they're trying to figure out how to get into different rooms in the house. The people who own the land suspect that there were a lot of juvenile Bigfoot that were on their property, and maybe even very young ones, because these people eventually evacuated from their house, and we have pictures of the drawings that the Bigfoot was doing on the walls, and they were all down low, like below the light switch. So we can't really envision a Bigfoot squatting down and doing these drawings. It looks like a kid, and it started out with scribbles, just like a juvenile, and then you can see where they started to try to do things that look like writing or different kinds of things, a face with eyes. And then they began to explore the house further and discovered the bathroom. Made a total mess of it. And they did everything from squeezing toothpaste all over the place to tearing up the toilet. And believe me, the people who own the house are happy. They did not know what a toilet was for. These kind of problems continued. Another person who's in the audience tonight has some psychic ability and is able to communicate at a nonverbal level, which he sometimes does on me. I get nowhere with it. But she went out to the dam where this destruction had happened, and she tried to communicate with the Bigfoot that this was not intentional. And she must have gotten through to them, because all of this destruction began to disappear. And the interesting thing is, there was like a basket that was made out of burlap that was just shaped in about as big as my hand. And in this rough piece of burlap, there were 3 old coins, something kind of goldish looking. There may have been something else, that's all I remember at the moment. It was left in front of their door. And the more you do research on the Bigfoot, you find out that they leave presents for people. And we can't help but think that maybe that was a peace offering. But those are the 2 most dramatic stories that we've gotten with the Bigfoot, and they are right here in our own backyards. The third topic about unusual realities in this area would be the underground bases. I've written another book, let's see here, Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains. I have lots of witnesses who have talked about 5 different bases in this part of the state. There's only one that's actually in Jackson County, and it is underneath the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute, commonly known as PARI, P-A-R-I. It started out as a Department of Defense operation back in the Cold War. From that place, they would monitor satellites and obviously just try to defend our country. I love to hear myself breathe now. There have been a few military people who have wondered why in the world I would want to expose a secret facility. And there's several reasons. One, my key witnesses all have high security clearance. We went to great lengths to protect them because they actually put themselves in jeopardy to come forward to talk about them. That's one reason. The second reason is a lot of strange things happen around these bases. And I'll stick with Perry since it's in Jackson County. There were people who worked for a tree farm in that area, and they saw people taking caged animals into the facility. Why? Why would they be doing that? One of the witnesses said that there are mind control things going on from that base. Excuse me, sometimes you can go right into the facility with no problem. And they pass it off today as just an astronomical research institute, but that's just like the capstone for this place, because the witnesses are telling me it's a city-sized facility that's 6 stories deep, and it's been there for quite some time. And another thing that makes it unusual is there are UFOs that are often seen around there. Some witnesses say they see them fly into and out of Wolf Lake, which is just to the west of Perry. That's very interesting. And I can give you my own personal experience. Whenever I got real close to that facility, you get this real unsettled feeling in your head. And I've only gone there with other people. They also have experienced that. And I call it people repellent. It makes you very uncomfortable. You just don't want to be around it, and you just as soon get out of there. And I think that's done very, very deliberately. This did better on my glasses. You didn't catch me breathing. Okay. So that gives you a hint of some of the unusual realities in Jackson County. And with that, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. If you don't have any questions, that's fine. I don't have a continuing show to perform, but I will take questions if you have them.
anything about the Brown Mountain lights?
I've seen them,
Oh, have you?
yeah. And it's mentioned in this book, but just briefly. If I remember correctly, there was a man who was in the Department of Social Services, and he and his girlfriend were hiking out there, and they saw, let's see if I remember which mountain it was, one of the mountains in the Linville Gorge, they saw it open up. And there, people have reported that also at, where else is it? Mount Mitchell, where there's a camouflage entrance that you absolutely cannot see, and then it'll open up, and vehicles can go in and out. When it closes up, even if you know it's there, you can't see it. So the Brown Mountain lights are in that area. There's many theories about it, but there is an underground facility of some sort in that area. There may be a connection that way. There's people who also think that the lights are orbs or spirits. That's a possibility too, because we've seen all sorts of reports of orbs being, spirits. So that's a possibility also. Yes?
How about the Cherokee? Did you do any interviewing with the Cherokee on the little?
Absolutely. Talked to the man who is now it's a very high title among the Cherokee, and it's called the Beloved Man.
Yes.
And Jerry, yeah. And both Evelyn and I, Evelyn is the co-founder with me with the website, and she and I have met with him in person. We did that after we had a story that I found unbelievable, and it was about a man who seemed quite sane, who saw a shape-shifting creature up on Yellow Mountain. And it sounded so phenomenal that I decided to check in with the Cherokee to see if they thought that was possible, and they did. And so after talking to 3 different Cherokees, 2 of them full-bloods, I decided it was worth posting. Okay? Yes, sir.
I was gonna say earlier, I just recently met a man that.
Can you hear him? He has a pretty good voice.
Yeah, he worked at the McKee, building. He told the story about finding the tunnel, and he's not the kind of guy that would say stuff like that. He said it's real, he just couldn't believe it.
The guys that because of Kathy and her husband that I got to meet, by the way, they wouldn't have talked to me if Kathy and Johnny hadn't opened the door. I mean, they're not going to just spout off about this. They trusted Johnny, and so they were willing to talk to me. Some of these people went to school there when it was a grade school, and the little boys used to smoke, and they would go down, and they said they would go through the janitor's closet when it was open, and then somehow they would get behind the wall down in the lower level of the McKee building, and they saw 3 of the little tunnels. And most of the tunnels seem to be running like from the McKee building in both directions from there. There's at least 2 of the tunnels that head toward the hill where the bird building is now. But these little boys would hide their cigarettes down there, and they would dare each other to go into these little tunnels, and they never did. I think they were all scared. But they did peek into them and see them. I love irony. There is some irony with this, because I checked with met with the man who's in charge of facilities at the university, and he confirmed that everybody in his department was familiar with the tunnels, which are now behind an artificial wall right behind the anthropology department. So here we have at least two ancient tunnels, maybe 3, right there. I never understood why the university didn't capitalize on such a phenomenal thing. It could have been the basis for a wonderful archaeology department, and I think they missed the boat. And from everything I can gather, they missed the boat because they wanted to make sure that their building projects didn't get slowed down, which I understand, but at the same time, a lot of very unusual things have been destroyed. Yes, sir.
Were these tunnels,
Talk louder, you get a microphone.
were the tunnels ever fully explored, or do they, why?
Well, they're-
Seems like that'd be easy enough to do if they're,
They
that's.
said they dropped a cable with a camera on it to at least look in. I think this gentleman that was telling me that they at least dropped a cable with a camera to go down and look inside it. Undoubtedly, they were made. There's no way it was just a natural, someone made.
No, because, I mean, it wasn't like an animal did it, because they were definitely square cut. And I've also been contacted by people since my book came out. One man had been a student at Western, and he said when he and his buddies were goofing off down by the river, the head of security came by carrying something that was a little bit bigger than a shoebox. And I'm surprised that the security man would explain this to the young men, but he said they were taking the bones of the little people they had found and going to bury them somewhere else so that the building project wouldn't get slowed down. The most recent thing that I've heard is just hearsay. And some of the people overheard people doing construction at the latest building project on campus, where they had Chili's restaurant and a little bookstore and some other things. And the men were making jokes about these little tunnels they saw, but obviously it didn't go beyond that. Also, when they were clearing land to build a building, let's say in the Webster area, I can't get more specific than that, they found these little tunnels also. So they're all over the place. And then I found an old newspaper article, and many years ago, when the theater was first built downtown Silva, they discovered these little tunnels also. So it's a vast network of little people that once must have really dominated this area. I personally think that they predate the Cherokee, and then the two cultures overlap. I think there's also the possibility that they may be responsible for the strange markings on the Judicola Rock. The Cherokee do not know what it means.
Well, that's what I want to ask you next about giants. See, I contacted the university one time. I live way up in North Canada, and I'm just in my property finding tons and tons of what looks like spearheads. And they're so big. So I contacted the school, wanted to talk to someone in archaeology or something, and she kind of shut me down, and we don't talk about that. Well, I don't want to hear any of that. What it's basically her up on.
You know, I've gone,
Oh, okay.
I can give you some confirmation from somebody who graduated from the anthropology department. And she said that there were 2 giant skeletons in their forensic storage area that had 6 toes. But whenever I approach people at the university, I don't get very far.
Do they have double rows of teeth?
I don't know.
Usually when they have the
6 toes?
that they-
I don't know if you heard him, he said usually when they have 6 toes, they have double rows of teeth. So if they were cannibals, you'd want to run like the babies. All righty, anything else? Yes,
I just want to,
can you hear
say
us?
something about UFOs.
Okay.
Now, because you mentioned some forms were triangular shaped. Now, I've heard that if they're triangular shaped, they're man-made and they're ours. So I don't know if that's, you know,
That's
I don't
real.
know if the military is trying to put some subterfuge there, so we don't pay much attention to it. But-
I'm glad you brought it up. I know that the head of Lockheed Martin back in the day said that anything you can imagine they've already created. I think there's a problem in this area because I think we have both man-made and extraterrestrial craft, and it's not easy to tell the difference. I do not think all triangular ones are man-made, but certainly some of them are.
They've been doing it over 100 years, apparently. You know,
They've been
we
doing it a
can't
long
believe
time.
how-
They keep so many secrets from us, it's just not right.
What the contrails
Yeah, oh, we could get into a whole lot of things.
and the bureau.
Yes,
I've been seeing orbs since I was a young child, and
can you hear her? No.
Speak up.
I've been seeing orbs
Here you go.
since I was.
See what you can do with it. Breathe right into it.
Hello. I've been seeing orbs since I was a young child, and I was just wondering, are some people more in tune to that kind of thing than other people? And what message do you think that they try to get across? Because I don't get a message. I just see them and.
The orbs you're probably seeing are probably spirits. When we human beings aren't in human form, I think we just turn into a ball of light. Anybody else?
What's an orb?
It looks like a semi-transparent illuminated ball of light.
Tinkerbell. Well, you know, in a fantasy.
Yes, yes.
I have a suggestion.
Uh-huh.
If you get a voice recorder, a digital voice recorder, and ask questions, there's a good chance that you'll be able to maybe get responses, yes or no answers, that sort of thing. It does help if you want to contact people. Make sure that there's no outside interference, like construction going on, cars going by. Do it when it's quiet inside, no TVs, no radios.
That's, from my experience, that tends to be more tracking down ghosts. The spirits that are true spirits rather than ghosts, I don't know if you would have success doing that or not. But with the ghosts, a lot of people have gotten that. By the way, there's a new owner for the Mercantile store in Dillsboro. Her name is Amanda Lacey. And she is a little bit psychic, and she has started what I call a ghost tour. But you can, since it's Halloween, you might want to look it up. I think she's giving tours, I'm guessing, I think it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Is that right? Friday and Saturday. And you can look it up. Let's see. Let me know if it's wrong. DillsboroAfterDark.com. And for some reason, you can only find it on Google right now. But if you want to have a ghost tour of Dillsboro and also learn some interesting history, that's a place to start. And she's a good storyteller, much better than I am. So if you can endure this, you would certainly enjoy that. Yes, sir.
Have you done any research on the Thomas Divine Lakes?
I talked to people. The story that immediately comes to mind is a young man, and he and his buddies went out in their, I think it was a truck, and they parked their car looking out over the valley from Thomas Ridge, and they will flash their lights, and when they do, orbs will come toward them. Now, the person I'm thinking of, he and his buddies freaked out and took off. But that phenomena apparently has been going on for quite some time. And I think the easiest way to get there is like you're going to Cherokee, and before you get to the visitor center and you get on the Blue Ridge, then you'll cross. Is that right? Okay. All righty. I do, yes. I'm going to introduce people now. The one who's trying to tell me what to do is a very good friend, and her name is Evelyn Gordon, and she and I started the website in 2008. Let's see, who else? Artie? Oh, and Vicki, the one behind the camera here. Vicki, you want to let people see you?
Hey!
Vicki does the Facebook page for the website. And in case I'm not one who normally wants to have my own Facebook page. I tend to be too private for that. But Facebook has rules. And we couldn't start a Facebook page for our website unless I had a personal Facebook page. And so Vicki takes care of both of those for me and does a really good job. Let's see if there's somebody else. I'm going to introduce her even though she's afraid somebody will come and make her do graphics for them, and she's not available. Cindy, you want to stand up? Cindy? has done the business cards we handed out. She did the same banner that is on our website. Somehow she was born with a brain that's very technical, and I sometimes rely on her to guide me through the wonderful world of computers.
She's from Mills Creek.
Mills River.
Mills Creek.
Mills River.
She's a moving target.
Mills River.
She's a bit of a gypsy, so even if you wanted her to do graphic arts for you, you probably have a hard time catching her. Oh, yes. I don't know how much I can, I don't know what I can say. Becca has originally been from here. She went off to the deep, dark woods of Minnesota and now is returning to civilization. And this is Becca. She's been very helpful behind the scenes on some of the website projects. Another person I want to introduce is Kay. Kate, stand up. If you're familiar with Hillsboro, Kate took a rundown old 1800s house that had been sitting empty for a bunch of years, and she has transformed it. And it's called the Whistle Stop Inn. It's almost directly across from the post office. And if you ever have out-of-town guests and you don't have room for them or you don't want them in your house, yeah, she'll take them. And she's really, really very friendly, and it's a delightful place.
Hillsboro's growing, by the way.
Did you hear? No. So, yeah. I think they heard you. Yes.
I had another question. Has there been any Bigfoot sightings in the Little Canada area?
I'm not going to get specific. For the simple reason I promise I'm going to protect these Bigfoot. But I will tell you this. We mentioned briefly the Judicola Rock. I will tell you this. Somewhere in some direction from that rock, we've had Bigfoot reports. My own theory is that the Judicola giant that the Cherokee talk about may very well have been a Bigfoot because they talk about it bounding across the mountain ridge tops, and the Bigfoot can make some really big leaps.
Devil's Courthouse is one of his spots.
That I don't know.
Wow.
The Devil's Courthouse is on the elbow of the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it's very close to the Perry Center. So most of the stuff is weird over
The
there.
entire Blue Ridge Parkway is a military installation, I do believe.
Well, the city-size thing underneath the Perry Center is extensive. And I've heard from 2 people it extends over into the South Carolina border. So it's not small. And I also believe from reports from many people that these underground facilities are connected by underground tunnels and a monorail system. What then? All right, Cindy, that's not the right word. What's the right word? Instead of a monorail. She's going to ignore me.
Magnetic levitation.
Say it again.
Magnetic
Thank you,
levitation.
thank you. So,
Mary,
some people,
do you want to mention your other book?
oh, thank you. See, I have to be guided by these other people. This third book has nothing to do with anything I've talked about. It's called Tangible Evidence of Jesus. It has information in there that most people don't know about Jesus. And the information comes from scientists and archaeologists, and it gives if you believe in Jesus, this should only help you believe in him more. And for those who have trouble with standardized Christianity, this book gives you information that gives a whole different light to it. So that's a different book. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate you all coming. If you ever get a good story, make sure you got the business card. Give me reach me by email. That's usually the best. So thank you very much.